Ready a journey into the heart of Africa. We're exploring the Azande people and how they saw witchcraft, magic, and oracles.
We'll be deep diving into Evans-Pritchard's work, Witchcraft, Oracles, and Magic Among the Azande. We're using the 1976 abridged version.
Oh, the one with that introduction by Eva Gillies?
That's the one.
Awesome. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll know what the Azande believed and how those beliefs fit into their everyday lives.
It might even make you think differently about how our own culture deals with bad luck, or things we can't explain.
You know, it's interesting because when we think of witchcraft, we often think of, like, spooky stories.
Right.
But for the Azande, it wasn't a folk tale.
No, not at all. For them, it was a fact of life. They believed that certain people actually had a physical substance. They called it witchcraft substance inside their bodies.
Wait, a physical substance? Like they could actually see it?
Well, they believed it was usually in the small intestines.
Oh, wow.
And get this, they would even do autopsies.
Autopsies. Really?
Yeah, to look for this substance in people who had died.
That's wild. They must have been pretty convinced about this whole thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But was this witchcraft substance something they were scared of? Like, did it terrify them?
It's interesting, actually. They weren't necessarily terrified. It wasn't about being scared of the supernatural.
So how did they feel about it then?
You know, Evans-Pritchard describes them as being more annoyed by witchcraft than afraid.
Annoyed, like it was an inconvenience or something.
Yeah, think of it like a pesky neighbor you can't get rid of.
Okay, I can see that. So how did they handle this annoying witchcraft? Did they have ways to protect themselves?
Absolutely, they had this whole system of, like, oracles and magic. But here's the thing. They didn't just blame everything on witchcraft.
So they didn't just say craft every time something bad happened.
Exactly. Let's say a granary collapses.
Okay.
They knew termites could cause that.
Right, natural causes.
But they'd also ask, why did it collapse at that exact moment when those particular people were under it?
Oh, so that's where witchcraft comes in.
Exactly. It explained the why me part of it.
Okay, so it's not denying reality, but adding another layer of explanation.
Right. It's a social explanation. It helped them make sense of why they were specifically affected.
It's kind of like how we might say, why me, when something unlucky happens? But for the Azande, it was more than just bad luck.
Yeah, and because they had an explanation, they could try to do something about it.
It gave them a sense of agency, huh?
Exactly.
Okay, so we're starting to see how witchcraft was woven into their lives.
And this brings us to another fascinating aspect, how witchcraft was tied to morality. They thought it came from bad feelings.
Like what?
Like envy, hatred, spite, those kinds of things.
So it wasn't just some random force, it was intentional.
Yeah, they saw it as a deliberate act. And this played into how they dealt with it. They had this practice with a fowl's wing.
A fowl's wing? What was that about?
So if someone thought you were using witchcraft against them,
Oh, okay.
they'd send you a fowl's wing. They'd ask you to blow water on it.
What? Like a peace offering?
Exactly. It was a way of saying, look, we think you might be harming us. Please stop, even if you're not doing it on purpose.
So even if you said, no, I'm not doing anything, you still had to blow water on the wing.
Right, and you had to really mean it. They believed it wouldn't work if you weren't sincere.
Wow, their beliefs ran deep. But hold on, if witchcraft was so common, was everyone suspicious of each other all the time?
That's a good question. In theory, anyone could be a witch. But those who were accused often had certain traits.
Like what?
They were often people who were greedy or jealous or just caused a lot of trouble.
So not just being different, but actually disrupting the community.
Exactly. It's right. Their concept of witchcraft helped keep society in check.
Wow, that's fascinating. So they had this whole system for understanding and dealing with witchcraft, but they weren't left to figure it out on their own, right? They had experts, those witch doctors we hear about.
Right. And they weren't just healers. They were more like investigators, protectors, even entertainers.
Wait, entertainers?
Oh, yeah. They had these elaborate ceremonies.
So they were like a combination of detective, therapist, and showman.
Pretty much. They were the ones who could see witchcraft, figure out its influence, and offer solutions.
It sounds like they held a lot of power in the community.
They did. And to become a witch doctor, well, it was quite a process.
Really? What did they have to do?
They had to go through these apprenticeships, learn all these secret techniques.
Like what?
Well, some even learned tricks like how to make it look like they were pulling object out of people's bodies.
No way. Like a magic show.
Yeah, but for them, it was about demonstrating their power and connecting with the spiritual realm.
That's amazing. So it wasn't all just hocus pocus. There was real skill and knowledge involved.
Oh, absolutely.
So they had these witch doctors who could help them understand and deal with witchcraft. But how did they actually identify the dangers? That's where the famous oracles come in, right?
Exactly. And the Azande had all kinds of them.
I've heard of the poison oracle, the one with the chicken.
Right, they'd give a chicken some poison and see how it reacted to get answers.
Using a chicken to talk to the spirit world.
Pretty wild, right? But that wasn't the only way. They also had termite oracles.
Termite oracles, like they would ask termites for advice.
Yeah. And rubbing board oracles, they even interpreted dreams.
Wow, that's so different from how we do things, but for the Azande, it was completely normal.
Totally. These oracles weren't just about seeing the future.
What else were they for?
They were for understanding the forces at play and making informed choices. It was about taking control,
So whether it was health or travel or social problems, they'd consult the oracles.
pretty much.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've covered witchcraft, the witch doctors, these amazing oracles. But what about magic? Was that part of their world too?
It really is amazing how much magic was just part of daily life for the Azande. Like, it was a tool they used for all sorts of things.
So not just like spells and potions, but magic they actually use for practical stuff. What kinds of things?
Oh, you name it. For protection, healing, good hunting, even getting ahead in society. Like, you could find love potions, good luck charms, even magic to make sure your crops grew well.
Sounds like they had a magical fix for every problem. But could anyone use this magic? Or was it just for certain people?
That's where things get interesting because Xandar magic wasn't just about the spells. There was a big moral side to it, too.
Like good magic versus bad magic.
Exactly. They believed there was good magic, the kind you'd use for protection or healing, and then there was bad magic meant to hurt people.
So using magic to farm someone was off limits.
Pretty much. Remember, they believed witchcraft came from those negative emotions, jealousy, all that. So using magic for bad stuff was like tapping into those bad vibes.
So there's a connection there between witchcraft and magic.
Definitely. It all comes back to intention. Like, are you using your power for good or for bad?
That makes sense. It's like they had this whole system built around right and wrong, good and bad, and it applied to both witchcraft and magic.
You got it. And here's something else that's pretty wild. Even the good magic, like the kind they might use to get revenge on a murderer,
Oh, wow.
even that could backfire if they weren't careful.
Seriously.
Yep. It shows just how deep their beliefs went. They knew that messing with supernatural forces, even for what seemed like a good reason, could have serious consequences.
It's like the whole thing is about balance, right? Trying to maintain harmony.
Exactly. And speaking of things changing, remember those closed associations we talked about earlier? The ones that popped up after Europeans showed up?
Right. They were like secret societies, right? How did those fit into all of this?
Well, they're a perfect example of how the Azande could adapt and make new things work with their old beliefs.
Like blending old and new.
Exactly. Take Mani, for example.
The thing you mentioned earlier?
Yep, it offered a different kind of protection and power. Not the same as the traditional beliefs, almost like an alternative.
So like, hey, things are changing. Maybe we need some new ways to protect ourselves.
Exactly. And remember what was unique about Mani. Both men and women could join.
Oh, yeah. You don't see that very often in traditional societies.
Nope. It really shook things up. It meant that even with these strict gender roles, women could find new ways to gain power and status.
It's like those closed associations were offering new possibilities.
Exactly. And, the authorities, the princes, they weren't too thrilled about it.
Really? Why not?
Well, imagine you're in charge.
Okay.
And suddenly there's this new group gaining influence with its own rules and rituals, and people are flocking to join.
I can see how that might be a little threatening.
Right. Plus, there's always that fear of the unknown. New practices, especially secret ones, always make people nervous, especially when magic is involved.
So it's this whole clash between old and new, right? Tradition versus innovation.
Exactly. But what about the average person? Do you think they were eager to join these new groups?
I wonder. I bet it was a mix of feelings. Some excited about the possibilities, others maybe a little scared or suspicious.
You hit the nail on the head. It's just like how they approached witchcraft. They were always weighing the risks and benefits.
Always trying to figure out how to stay safe and keep the peace in their world.
Exactly. But Mani wasn't just a social club. It had real power. And the way they structured that power was fascinating.
Okay, how so?
Well, to move up in the ranks, you had to literally buy your way in.
So the more you paid, the more powerful you became.
Pretty much. It started with Water Mani, then you had Blue Beet Mani, and at the very top there was Mike Mani, which was said to be incredibly powerful.
Like, how powerful are we talking?
Rumor had it that Night Mani could even break the neck of anyone who tried to hurt a member.
Whoa, that's some serious magic. But if you're buying all this power, do people even know what they were getting?
That's the thing. Only the leaders knew the secret ingredients of these medicines. Everyone else just had to trust them.
Wow, so there's this element of faith involved. You're putting your life in the hands of these leaders. That's a lot of trust.
It is. And think about it. Women could rise to leadership positions in these groups.
Right.
In a society where gender roles were so strict, this was a huge deal. It's like Mani wasn't just offering power. It was challenging the very structure of their society.
It's like this collision of ideas and traditions, the old world bumping up against the new. Did all of this create tension and conflict in the community?
It's amazing how the Azande could just roll with the punches, New challenges, new people coming in, but they always found a way to make it work with their own way of seeing things.
It's like they were open to new ideas, but without completely abandoning their own traditions.
Yeah, and, it shows how practical they were. Remember, they didn't just say, oh, it's witchcraft, and leave it at that.
Right, they were logical about it.
Exactly. They understood natural causes, they observed things, they thought things through.
It challenges the way we often think about, well, different cultures, right?
Yeah.
We sometimes think of like primitive versus modern,
Right.
assuming that some rely on superstition while others are all about reason.
Right.
But with the Azande, it's clear that it's not that simple.
No, not at all. Even in a society where magic is a part of everyday life, people still use logic. They still observe and think critically.
It's like EVANS-PRITCHARD says, you can't just judge them based on our own cultural standards.
Exactly. We have to try to see things from their perspective.
Understand their context, their way of thinking, their own logic.
Right. Because what might seem illogical to us might make perfect sense to them.
And that's what's so cool about anthropology. It
Right.
helps us step outside our own little bubble and see the world through someone else's eyes.
For sure.
It makes us question our own assumptions about, well, pretty much everything.
It really does.
So thinking back on all this, what stands out most to you about how the Azande dealt with bad luck and the unknown? Did it make you think differently about how we deal with these things?
What really struck me is how they weren't passive about misfortune. Like, they didn't just accept whatever happened. They actually tried to do something about it.
They had that whole system of oracles, magic, rituals.
Right, like they were actively trying to shape their own fate.
It's like they knew they had some control over their lives even when faced with the unknown.
Yeah. It's inspiring in a way, isn't it?
Definitely. And it makes me think, maybe instead of feeling helpless when bad things happen,
Yeah.
maybe we can take a page from the Azande's book.
Yeah?
Remember that we're not just victims of circumstance. We can use our own knowledge and resources to navigate the challenges life throws our way.
Absolutely.
And while their specific methods might seem, well, a bit strange to us,
Yeah.
the underlying idea is something we can all relate to.
Right. We all want to understand the world around us.
Find meaning in it and try to have some control over what happens to us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, it's been an awesome deep dive into the world of the Azande.
I agree.
Hope you enjoyed it too and learned something new along the way.
And hey, next time you run into a bit of bad luck,
Yeah.
think about the Azande.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll help you see things a little differently.
That's a great point. Until next time.
See you then.